I'm just preparing the live stream. Once it goes live, you can kick in.
All right, perfect. Okay.
Preparing the live stream. Once it goes live, you can kick in.
All right. Jai Bhim, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this meeting. I welcome you all. And this is a third event in the series of this Dialogics. And this is this is also a topic which holds very special attention in the present context, as well as you may see the news around the excavation and all which is happening in Ayodhya. So, and in also in a sense the cultural in relation with the cultural relations in India's regional context, the Iyothee Thass, Ambedkar, and other spaces in other places in India. So, but before I hand over this session to Suraj, there are few ground rules. Please be muted, and if you have any question, please direct in chat box. And uh, panelists will have 15 minutes each. They can go on till 15 minutes, and then at the end we will have Q&A session. So, and we are also live on YouTube. People who are not able to join, they can watch on YouTube, and also if you are interested, you can share the link among your circles, so many people can join. So with this, again, I thank you all for joining. Over to you, Suraj.
Thank you so much, Prashant, and thank you for being the co-conspirator of Dialogic series. This is the third in line. It has been an excellent space that we tried to create, and I believe this is how it is going to churn out more critical conversations. Before I begin, I would like to thank the three esteemed panelists. It was and I think this is a good curse in a way, and I'm using good in a very cautious tone, simply because the pandemic that has wrought our existence in a way has now made us little bit more inventive, and we are trying to explore new spaces, new ways to tackle this. And I think one of the ways we will be able to tackle this is to stay connected, and and let the intellectual flow move, let the mental space be part of our conduct. So to do that, getting three of you together, Gaji, Yojana, and Chris, is itself it's itself a timely miracle, because as we see, spatially we are different, and if unless it was a Buddhist conference which would have been thought out for many months or probably year, it would not have been possible for any of you to leave your space and be somewhere else. So I think that's a blessing. To phase out, the first dialogics we had was on defining Ambedkarism. We were keen on knowing what Ambedkarism is. Is there at all a thing called Ambedkarism? If it is, then how do we define it? What are the methodological concerns? Is it concerned to Buddhism? It is concerned to his labor activism? There are many questions, because Ambedkar in his life, especially the public life, has been so multifaceted. And then the second we did topic was anti-caste ecological politics, because the ecological concerns, the eco side committed by the modern infrastructure as well as the capitalist greed, has really taken back what belonged to us, which is fresh air, fresh water, fresh green around us, and we are literally have to now buy fresh air and live in this. So I think to pave this path, we just had to conduct a third talk, which is very close to me personally, as others also, is about Buddhism and revival of Buddhism. So before I begin, I would like to remember the great Pandit from the Tamil land, who himself a very educated man, a practicing a medicine practitioner, editor, journalist, Iyothee Thass. We are celebrating his 175th birthday, and I think it's very telling for the rest of the Buddhist community in India to also commemorate Pandit Iyothee Thass, simply because he's a fabulous intervention to our own historical pasts, and especially as someone who comes from a Dalit background. Iyothee Thass himself, being a Dalit, had a kind of paved a path that we were not always made untouchables. We also had a glorious past, glorious histories that were tied to the great rich legacy of Buddha. And of course, following that, we also have Baba Saheb Ambedkar, one of the greatest Buddhist movement, who ran and interpreted Buddha for his community. And I think in this conversations, it's very important that we have Iyothee Thass and B.R. Ambedkar talk together with these three scholars who have devoted their time understanding Buddha, understanding Ambedkar Buddhism, understand Iyothee Thass's Buddhism, and so forth and so forth. Today, as we excuse me, as we gather, one of the important points that was coming is the Dalit condition right now is primarily a rebellion against a spiritual warfare imposed through religious administrations. And I think we have to understand how the Dalit condition is operating. Therefore, the act of protest for Dalits is taken through embracing non-Hindu, anti-Brahminic values via Buddhism. And that's how the conduct of Buddhist values kind of come and create a rooting. There are many misgivings about Buddhism. There are also many myths about Buddhism, and also how Buddhism kind of continues to be ism from the Buddha's kind of work and life stories. And Ambedkar gives us cues and hints. And as we all know, he wanted to go back and work on Buddha and his Dhamma. After, of course, he received criticisms, and then he wanted to, of course, add more on that. He couldn't do it. And I think that's the task that many of us scholars who have studied him have to fill, that have to inform the public about what are the new developments. We have to do that. Within the spiritual and religious metaphors, there are different meanings, especially in the Dalit life worlds. What is spiritual? What is religious? It could mean one thing in a theosophical way, but also in a practicing world, it could mean different. And I think that internal religious practice has to also be investigated through this. And therefore, I think we need a different orientation to describe these categories in the experiential dynamics beyond the conventional conception of religion or conceptual convention understanding of Buddhism or even spiritualism, if it is. So it is here that we are trying to find in Dialogics the conceptual freedoms. I want us, you and I, and collectively to direct an ideological autonomy to the lived Dalit life, a lived Dalit experience. The reason I say this is that the Dalit community is the negotiator of Dalit life worlds, which are often conceptually drawn to finding requisite answer. That's why you will see the Bhakti tradition or any non-Brahminic tradition, Dalits went, and even in Islam, in Christianity and other faith. So I think the finding an answer to a certain predicament is, I think, itself a holy act. And then the question is Ambedkar's Buddhism about then the loving kindness 10 minutes type of corporate meditation? Or is Ambedkar Buddhism or Iyothee Thass's Buddhism catering to the middle class anxiety who want to give away with their wretched and disgruntled past? Is also the Buddhism of the Dalits have to do with establishing their credentials in the historical myths? So I invite you to engage in this, and for that we have an excellent stellar panel. We have Dr. Gajendran Ayyathurai. Probably after Ambedkar, Gajendra is the Dalit who got a PhD from Columbia University, so he has that a very special honor within the community. He is a historian and as well anthropologist of modern India. He studies the problem of caste and in what ways privileged castes hegemonize and perpetuate marginality. And within that, he is trying to find the anti-caste culture and political histories of the marginalized. And within that, he frames his question. He's also very much a votary of looking closely at the vernaculars and trying to find a new canon through that. And I think one of the things Gaji and I constantly talk about is the importance of non-English methodical approaches. Gaji, again, today presently he's at the Center for Modern Indian Studies. We had good time when I had visited Göttingen, a beautiful city. But also we had struck on conversations about the transcendence of Buddhism or the Tamilian through the diasporic spaces across beyond the Indian Oceanic borders. Then we have Yojana Bhagat. Dr. Yojana Bhagat is currently heading a very excellent department. They are still on an ad hoc right now, and they are trying to push for a permanent seat for a department of Pali at University of Mumbai. Given the current state, it's getting quite difficult. But I think if we are resilient and if we support Professor Yojana Bhagat and her team, we might be able to institute a proper Pali Studies department. She was first registered student at she is Ulhasnagar, Bombay, but originally she is from Vidarbha. She is architecture. She has a degree in architecture from JJ, another esteemed college, and then she studied master of philosophy in Buddhism. Then she has masters in Pali language, and then she has a master in ancient Indian culture. Plus, she had 2 doctorates. So I think we just have to add many letters after her name. She's a Vipassana meditator since 1988. So that means she's been a long time a follower of the Goenka tradition, and she has been initially inducted into Buddha by the Pali language canon. I think that's what will add a new flavor to it. She's also identified as a reasonably good trekker who has climbed around 140 forts in the Sahyadri mountainous range in Maharashtra. And also she likes to bike, so she's on motorcycle in different parts of India. And as we know, her students are very dedicated to the program she does and the kind of Buddhist values they try to bring. I had a good fortune to visit them once, and we interacted with them on research methodology. Finally, we have a white Ambedkarite with us, and his relation with Ambedkarite Buddhism comes very very intimately. Chris Quinn has been a dean, excuse me, been at the Harvard's extension school. He has a MDiv from the UTS in 1972. Then he went to Harvard Divinity School for graduate studies, and then he has a PhD from BU in the philosophy and phenomenology of religion. In 1986 is when he got his doctorate. Dr. Quinn is a leading authority on socially engaged Buddhism in Asia and the West. He served as a lecturer on various world religious and Buddhist studies, and as we know, from 1998 to 2018, for 30 years, he's been in this field at Harvard. He holds degrees in religion, theology, and history. His publications center on socially engaged Buddhism and the Buddhist liberation movement of India's Dalits, spearheaded by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. His work has been quite seminal on various fronts, especially on the socially engaged Buddhism discipline, where, for example, his co-edited anthologies are Buddhism, Action, Dharma, New Studies in Engaged Buddhism, published by Routledge in 2003, Engaged Buddhism in the West, published by Wisdom Publications, American Buddhism, Methods and Findings in Recent Scholarship, and of course, his regular interventions to the Navayana or rather Navayana formulation of Buddhism has also been important, and he's a frequent visitor to India. So now I give the floor to Gajendran Ayyathurai.
Hello, everyone. Am I audible to everybody? Yeah, good. All right. So thank you, Suraj, for this. And, I think you've really, you are one of the few who could find a great opportunity in this difficult time, and you are able to connect us, from different continents. We are able to come together, and and to think it over. And sometimes, when we conduct conferences, literally in our institutions, not many are able to get access to. That way, our thoughts, our ideas are stuck with only a few specialists. Now, in this opportunity, we are able to up and then connect with a lot of folks, activists and academics on the same plane, to see whether we make sense, and then learn from each other, and move on, given the sort of challenges we have. Good. So thank you, Suraj, and it's a great pleasure to see Chris Queen again after my 2009 conference at Columbia, where I had invited him to, this was a conference, first conference in honor of Ambedkar at Columbia, 2009. I took the lead in organizing it. I made sure, given the knowledge that I gained from his engagement with Buddhism, I brought him in, and it's a great, privilege to be with a sister here who works on Pali, who has contributed a lot, Yojana Bhagat. And I want to read more about your work, sister. We'll do that. So great to be with you all. And of course, many friends, and then I see people like Lenny, and you and others who have also worked on Iyothee Thass, and so there are many. So I have my own perspective, my own interpretation. I want to share this with you to reflect more on. Okay, I'm giving 15 minutes. I'll try to stick to it, and then we'll go. I have a PowerPoint. Yeah, here you go. Are you guys able to see? Yeah. So yeah, good. Okay, thank you. All right. So this is the topic, that I thought I'll throw it, and then it's going to be more of. I have some 10 slides. I'll go over very quickly to make sure that they are all like sound bites, so that we can mull over as we progress. Okay, this is the title: Iyothee Thass and Tamil Buddhism: The Local and Global Relevance of an Organic Intellectual. So I view, through my, research work for the past few years, and this was actually, Thass and Tamil Buddhism was my doctoral work at Columbia, which is going to be a book soon. It is under review. And I've been thinking a lot about his philosophical and political relevance. And I clearly see a lot of, Iyothee Thass' pioneering thoughts have both local relevance among the Tamil-speaking public as well as across the world. We'll see how he's relevant. So this is a quick thing I have. The title of this is Caste-Based Anthropology and History of the Oppressed: Academic and Civil Societal Mimesis. There is a sort of mimicking of each other, academic perspective and civil societal perspective. Now, how has it happened? It has happened from, you have, maybe I'll, yeah. So pre-colonial and colonial perspective. What has happened to, how were the people, the marginalized, the caste-based marginalized people were looked at during the pre-colonial and colonial times? These are the categories that you see. They were called as untouchables. There are very progressively, depressed classes, are panchamas and achyuts and so on. And then definitely they were all spatially pushed into the zone called cherries or ghettos, right? That is the status in the pre-colonial and colonial times. Now, post-colonial, what has happened? So in a very progressive way, independent India, we have categories like SCs and STs, and then weaker sections. This is how we've been calling our Indian citizens who have been multiply oppressed as untouchable. In a very progressive way, we've been calling them as scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. And then since the 90s, as we know, with Ambedkar's anniversary, so we have the category Dalit taking shape outside Maharashtra. Clearly, some Tamil writers, for instance, began to write about it, and it is a kind of spreading. Is it fully spread? No, it's not the case. I keep interviewing people in interior Tamil Nadu. They don't know what is the term Dalit, or what does it mean, and so on. It's not their ignorance. That's what I want to point out through Thassism in some ways. So they have their own ways of looking at it, and we'll see. And then from the 90s onwards, we have Dalit music, and we even have a Dalit Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. And then we have somebody selling Dalit foods, etc., in Delhi, and so on. So how have we dealt with Dalit memory and history so far is mostly in the negative framework. That means oppression and brokenness, physical violation, rape, but that is how the portrayal of the oppressed. So my presentation, through this presentation, via Thass, I'm asking, like Thass did, are there alternative ways of self-recognition? I'm not bothered about others recognizing untouchable as this way or that way. No, what is their own perspective? Do we have theoretical tools in anthropology and history? As anthropology was first established in Colombia, and I've been trained there. I don't think our anthropology answers a more honorable self-recognition of the marginalized in India so far. So that is beyond caste. That's what I have in that. So instead, you find through the organic intellectuals, what we have is a multilinear perception. It's not seeing unilinear subcontinental perspective. Multiple perspective from every region has emerged. It's multifocal. It's not one focus. They are focusing on different things. We can talk about all this and it's polyphonic. It's not one guy shouting and yelling against caste or talking about this is what I am. Or no, there are multiple voices emerging across the subcontinent. Do we have the theoretical tools? Historical, anthropological, humanities, social sciences. It's a question that we should all think about. All right, good. Then there is this, that way I say there is this academic failure to address what can a caste-based oppressed person learn from the curricula that we are circulating. Can anything, the modern Indian history offer something that satisfies, that centers the people, Indians, citizens who've been marginalized so long? I don't think it is the case. We have to think it over. It is in this context, we need to understand organic intellectuals. It's plural. It's not just Ambedkar, it's not just Pali, it's not just Iyothee Thass. There are multiple organic intellectuals that we are yet to unearth. Let's be very clear. And and they critique the academy and civil society. That's what I have it as a title. They are not satisfied with the academic theories we churn out. There are more Foucauldians in India more than Foucault himself. There are more Derridians in India more than Derrida himself. There are, of course, more Marxists in India more than Marx himself. But how far have we gone along to centralize the perspective of the marginalized? Can we ask that question from the point of view of the caste-based oppressed girl or a woman? Do we have an answer? We have a long way to go. So what did Thass do? Iyothee Thass between 1845 to 1914. So that is his lifetime. So he literally, Ambedkar was a Columbia in 1913. So Thass passed away around this time. The most important thing from Thass, as we all know probably, his body of work comes actually from the weekly that he published from 1907 to 1914. He dies on May 5th. Till that week, the issue was published. I don't think any of us, we putting together, all of us, can run a journal for 7 years, non-stop for a week. Clearly, no. We have multiple problems. But this man did it. And he titled this not as a Dalit, not as a Pariah, not as a Panchama, but as the Tamilian. What is it? Why did he do it? That's what sort of tickled me to think very seriously. Why did he do it? Why did he sort of connected the identity of the oppressed through the linguistic identity? It's a very important thing for us to think it over. And he is an organic intellectual that we should take seriously. Good. So what happened was, how did he get into this? He was actually an Advaita man in the 70s and so on. But something happened. Not many who has worked on Iyothee Thass has spoken about it so far or written about it. In 1892, something happened. There was a Madras Mahajana Sabha in Chennai meeting. He was invited to attend. And he went, and literally the Brahmins and non-Brahmin privileged groups humiliated him. He was supposed to go and speak on what is called the Pariah problem. And when he said, look, why can't we open up the Shaivite and Vaishnavite temples so that others also, everybody could join in? The moment he said that, the Brahmins, some of them got up, especially when Shastri got up he was from Tanjavur, shouted at him, we have given you Mariamman, Kaliamman, and Madurai Veeran, all those gods to you. You don't belong to Shaivism and Vaishnavism. This was 1892. And so and then he was humiliated, he walked out. thinking there is a clear cultural divide between the Brahmins and those who have been oppressed as untouchables. So this moment is a very crucial moment for him, breaking away from all Hindu perspectives. But at that time, this category was not even popular, right? In 1890s, it was not even popular, not even in the first decade of the 20th century. Not many know this. So clearly, he broke away from that and then asked the question, who am I? That's a question I think most of us who are anti-caste should ask this question. Who am I? What am I? If I'm going to have all the organs like any white man or a black man or a brown man, whatever, where does this caste, how do they identify me? Did I identify myself or somebody else? That's a question that we all need to address. Every one of us should grapple with this question. Now, as Thass was thinking about it, something happened in Tamil Nadu. From the 1815 onwards, a new corpus, Tamil literary corpus, getting unearthed. Many of them belong to the first few centuries of the first millennium. So such as I've written Sangam literary corpus, Tirukkural, Manimegalai. Interestingly, Manimegalai, for instance, was a Buddhist text talking about common Buddhists in the Tamil-speaking regions. So this is one of the first texts talking about common Buddhists in India. All right. So way back in the 4th, 5th century, first millennium. So he asked this question, who were these people? Right? And then he intertextually, as I write, connects the ancient, medieval, modern text to ask, wow, that means the most marginalized who have been part of this Buddhist tradition, they were actually Buddhists much before the caste infliction. That's how he understood. And then he clearly attacked the Brahmins as the #1 propagators of casteism. So clearly, this is quote I have, they are mere casteist perversion. That's how he attacked Brahminism and so on, Thass. And I use the word provincialize very carefully here to show that we have a famous book, Provincializing Europe from Dipesh Chakravarti. Now, this is very happy, we all agree the colonialism has ruined India forever, from which I don't know when we will totally recover. I agree. But let's also talk about internal colonialism, that is casteism. When I was writing my dissertation at Columbia, I couldn't even get a definition of Brahminism and casteism. We can't say the same about whiteness. There are many, you cannot count the white men and women who have written against racism, who have written against whiteness. How many we have on Brahminism, Brahminness, Brahminization, right? So that's a tragedy. But then we have a lot of committed Dalit theorists sitting in North America and Europe. So this is the question. So here you go, an organic intellectual called Thass is provincializing the Brahminical texts, Brahminism, and the Brahmins who were alive. So he was confronting the Brahmins. There's a nice discussion going around, let's bash up Brahminism, and no, let's not bash up Brahmins. Nice to hear. But concretely, what was the presence of Brahmins doing in the public space? He was humiliated by a Brahmin male. So what should he do as a human? Therefore, he writes this article that I mentioned to you way back in 1911, Who is Human? When I read this at Columbia, sitting at Columbia, I had a goosebump. It also helped me to ask, who am I further? You see my self-emancipation through Thass? Of course, intellectual and political also. So now, therefore, I'm using Judith Butler here to show that these people emerge as self-narrative beings, self-narrating beings. That's why I said self-recognition. Thass said, bloody hell, I don't belong to the caste system. I'm not a pariah. I'm not an oppressed or a Dalit. He would not even agree to the word Dalit, perhaps. Because it means a negative category. So what is the positive category that he can think about? That's the question he raised. We have things to learn. Look at this. So clearly for him, Aryanism and Brahminism topped the list. He was going berserk on Brahminism. And so for him, annihilation of caste begins with the rejection and repudiation of Brahmin male power. I'm not going around using the phrase Brahminical patriarchy and so on. No. I'm beginning to write as Brahmin male power. What have they done? How are they strengthening? We have not come across this phrase to pinpoint how the Brahmin males are benefiting across the world in the here and now. I am in the Western Academy for the past close to 2 decades. I have not come across many middle class and lower class and Dalits, right? Why? That means you have all kinds of people, again from the privileged groups, and I don't think things are going to change anytime soon. And here you go, Thass taking on very boldly that we, the academics, have not done. Look at him. So in the nation, they invent foods like vada, payasam, thosai, all that they do, they eat like ducks. This is how he writes. He was berserk. And after such gluttony, they apply sandal clays all over the body in order to roll on the thinnai. Thinnai is the right platform in Tamil Nadu. So these are the inventions of the land, of this land. So he was literally rejecting, this was 1910, critically. So I find this as the emergence of critical cause publics, as I call. Critical cause public. And of course, I'm introducing a new subfield called critical cause studies. I'm writing a piece which will be out soon. Thankfully, my article on critical cause feminism has been approved in a top journal. You guys will be seeing it very soon in a few months. I call it critical cause feminism based on my understanding of Tamil Buddhist women and men. So, and therefore I see Periyar. The moment I was reading Thass, I thought, till then, Periyar was the ultimate radical for me, personally speaking, because this man was really, truly an exemplary feminist, Periyar. But clearly, for Periyar, Thass was a major influence. It is said Periyar had 3 pictures at his house, and Iyothee Thass was one of them. So clearly, Ambedkar, I'm sure has derived a lot from Thass. I have not come across any outcome directly connecting Ambedkar to Thass. But of course, we know Lakshmi Narasu was, Lakshmi Narasu became Lakshmi Narasu in a big way through the workshops of Iyothee Thass.
Gajendran, sorry to intervene. You have 2 more minutes.
Okay, so that's how it goes. And so we have, I've said it, and then we have, so he looked at the marginalized more from the, for a native perspective. Okay, so he wrote a series called Indira Terasa Sarithram, History of the Indian Nation. So how do you rebuild, how do you interpret the history of the world, I mean, history of the oppressed communities from their own perspective? That is Indira Terasa. Indira for him is Buddha, not Indra, the god, the Brahmanical god. So he goes into, sort of artifacts and archives, digs up and tries to understand. Let me rush through, as I don't have many minutes. So therefore you find him throwing up, I'll get back to these slides later. So knowledge traditions of the oppressed. Have we asked, what are the knowledge traditions of the oppressed? They've been working the agricultural lands and their tools, their knowledge system, we are yet to unravel that. So agriculture for him is the backbone. But all these knowledge systems, archives, artifacts for him are connected with Buddhism in a big way. Because as I write here, it's the religion of the costless or the cost-free. So I'm using Lars Ekstein's theoretical perspective to think about it. So the last point I want to insist is that linguistic identity of the oppressed. We have not thought about how vernacular Buddhist memory and history could be recovered and recorded and celebrated. So for him, Pali, Tamil, Sanskrit, they are sister languages. They are not derivative from Sanskrit as some of the Sanskritists do. Completely is disagreeing with it. He is finding simultaneous development of multiple languages through Buddhism. He talks about more than 22 linguistic zones. And that's how, and so he called the oppressed Tamils as this, these are the categories: Tamilians, Buddhists, indigenous communities, original Dravidians, Dravidian Buddhists, caste-free Dravidians. These are the categories you use. Here you don't have a clue of them being a Paraya or a Dalit. No way. So this is so powerful. Rejection of, look at this. He never wrote Parayar with an I. He simply wrote as Parayar. That means somebody who speaks against caste. Okay. So critical caste feminism I spoke about. He wrote an article. Look at this last one. Who is responsible for the fallen condition of the women of India? This was written in English. It is the men themselves. This was in 1912. Where are our distinguished feminists? Why have they not recognized Thass so far? And he was the first guy to establish what is called a ladies' column in which women wrote. I had goosebumps reading them and asked myself, am I deserved to be an honest male? So I have my problems, like many of us do, many of we the males do. But these people raise questions of sexuality. We'll talk about it. So Tamil Buddhism is nothing but becoming human. That's what I look at. Radical modernist humanism. He combines science and technology at the same time. It's not a religious tradition, right? It's not a ritual, like I say. It's not like, I think Suraj also pointed out, it's not looking at God as a Buddha with a big halo. No, he was a pioneer of modern thinking. West is yet to recognize Buddha in some ways. That means no rituals, no salvation after the life and so on. Here and now, how can I live with humanism and pass away? That's the question. And it involved the combination of the oppressor and the oppressed, oppressors and the oppressed coming together to create a caste-free society, which I think we have a long way to go. And therefore, yeah, I stop here. Thanks. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much, Gaji. I think you can, if you have the last point, I don't know if that was an accident or something, but if you want to put a closure to the last point that had happened, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Suraj. I will not take more than sorry, Prashant, for taking a couple of more minutes, and I'll stop here. This is a crucial thing for us to understand. In this slide, I have like, what is Buddhism? It's not like Suraj also pointed out. It's not we becoming, celebrating a god and having this mumbo jumbo ritual aspects. No. And so how do I say that? Thass, wherever I went, by the way, some of his descendants established Buddhist vihara in the 1920s, which are still functioning. My next article is going to be on them in Hubli, Karnataka. It's still active from 1924, by the way. So, and some of them met with Ambedkar in the Nepal Congress in the 50s, and Ambedkar stood up and hugged them and said, this is what Shanmugam told me. He passed away in his 90s. So he told me when he stood up and hugged, I'm still thinking about Buddhism. Here you guys are calling yourself as Tamil Buddhists and Buddhists and so on. So that way, these guys were practical. And the Thass was extraordinary. He was talking about Columbia University, sitting in Chennai. The research that went on at Columbia, in a very progressive side, that's what I mean by science and technology. He was open to that. He's talking about avocado, how it is a very healthy fruit to eat. And the coffee research at Columbia, astounding, and then talks about St. Louis women, and then all that, a multiple global perspective he had. And of course, he was a pioneer of initiating affirmative action. I have read the archives that he had written saying why there are so many Brahmins in the whole office. Not more than 4 per head should be per community. So he was very clear. So affirmative action, I spoke to Gail Ahmed, she clearly said, Phule would have initiated this in some crude ways, but Iyothee Thass hammered it very clearly. If you are more than 4, get out. There are others who should take over. You see? They were very clearly. So affirmative, and then land to the tiller, economic aspect. He was not simply into reverential Buddhism, but land to the tiller. So that way, I see this as a radical modernist humanism coming. And we, the academics, have been having, should we talk about cultural politics of the Dalits, identity politics? Let's take only class and not caste. Let's not confuse ourselves. And there I have close friends with my colleagues such as Rupa Viswanath, Nate Roberts. All of us are having the same perspective in the sense, how to form a community beyond the caste. This is a dilemma. We don't have a clear solution. But there is this caste-free identity that we have to move towards. Do we have full answers in other theories we have? I am not satisfied. Does it give equal, does it give me a caste-free identity to me and millions others? That's a question that I'm grappling with. I think, thank you for the extra time. Sorry, Suraj. Sorry, Prashant. We'll continue. Please throw me all the questions that you would like to.
Indeed. This has been a rich conversation. You just enthralled us. So now may I please invite Dr. Yojana Bhagat. Gaji, you can perhaps, can I stop the screen? I can do that.
Sorry. I'll do that.
No, it's okay.
I'm stopping the share. I've done it. Is it good now?
Yeah, thank you.
Good.
Go ahead, Dr. Bhagat.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Jai Bhim to all. And thank you, Suraj, for inviting me here. It's good to see you. And I would like to begin telling people about my department first. We restarted the Department of Pali, rather the studies of Pali in Mumbai University in 2005. And then from there on, right from 12 students, today we have 300 students doing, PhD, MPhil, and master's course, fire integrated, and diploma degree courses, and that too in pure Pali. Okay, now, sir, why we have so much interest in the language and the teachings of the Buddha? That's because, we have been asking, after Baba Sahib has given us the Dhamma, nobody has actually explain what actual Dhamma is, what Buddha has to say about it. And then when we actually go to the original source of Pali and then learn what actually Buddha wants us to know, and then what Baba Sahib actually wants us to know, right? So if we go to the original sources and learn, then we get to know what great thing Baba Sahib has done for us, how he directed us towards Buddhism, and why he is called the Bodhisattva. Right, that is the main thing, I think, which has to be understood. Now, when we talk about all these things, what I think the whole journey should begin for us after Baba Sahib directed us towards Buddhism, right? And what happened beforehand, what he had said about things. I think the final aspect he gave us was like, okay, now what you have to do is go to the, I'm directing you towards the Buddha, and you have to follow the Dhamma now, no? And then he was very clear that, okay, what you have to do, while giving us the Dhamma, he gave us the 22 woes, and then he asked us how to follow, right? How to follow the Dhamma, what is there in the Dhamma, and why to follow Buddhism. As Professor Gajendra was saying, that we are the marginalized, right? But you have to understand the history. When we go into the at the time of Buddha or afterwards, 1,000 years afterwards, we have to know that, in India, Buddhism was the mainstream, and Buddhism had the capacity, or rather, it still has the capacity to become the mainstream of the country, right? And it has all the answers. But till date, what has happened is we have not, learned the Dhamma, or we have not practiced. It is not something which we just take and just don't practice it. It is the teaching has the Buddha has to be learned, and then taken into practice, and then you have to become self-enlightened. Okay, so the thing is, what you have to do is, when we try to teach the teaching of the Buddha, it has the three aspects. Okay, the three aspects. It is called as Pariyatti, Patipatti, and Pativedan. Now, Pariyatti is when we learn, okay, what we call the Dhamma Savana, and we learn the teaching of Buddha, what Buddha has to say about things, and it's not about general, only about, how to meditate or something. Buddha was the greatest teacher, and he has, covered every aspect of life. We have all the answers of all the contemporary problems in the teachings of Buddha. Okay, so when we talk about the teachings of Buddha, it is not just things like okay, how to pray, or how to meditate, or how to go about spiritual. We have four aspects, the four what do you say, the stakeholders, like the bhikkhu, bhikkhunis, and the upasaka, upasikas, right? So we come into the third and fourth category of upasak, upasika, who were large followers of the Buddha. And when we are thinking of that, okay, so today, are we actually following the Dhamma as a upasaka, upasikas? And what are we doing? What is expected of us, as Baba Sahib expected from us? What he wanted us to do was, tread the path which he has shown us. Are we doing that? Are we doing that? We are not doing it, right? We are not following the Buddha because we don't know who the Buddha is. Distorted versions of what Buddha is, or who Buddha was, or what historical things are presented in front of us, and actually who is presenting that distorted version of Buddhism in front of us, that is another question, right? So we need scholars who will really go into the original sources, learn what Buddha is saying about what things, and how we have to adopt, and become the what do you say, the mainstream. That is very important. And you have to understand that we had a Buddhist culture, and today what we are lacking, it we say that, oh, we are not following any, we don't want to be Hindu, okay, and you take away entire culture out of Hindu culture. We don't want to be that, okay, then, but we are not replacing it with anything. Okay, you just cannot take out from people that okay, don't follow this, don't follow this, but what is to be followed, that is not given to them. So when we research, or when we study the ancient history, ancient Indian culture, and we know that, oh, this is Buddhism, okay, this is how the this is what is art is, this is what is the culture is, this is what the architecture is all about, how they had practiced Buddhism. And we had a great heritage which is there, and we are not identifying with it. Okay, we are not identifying with that. So I think our main concern would be that we have to give people the right knowledge about what Buddha is, what Buddhism is all about, what Baba Sahib wanted us to do, and that would give us a new identity, definitely. And I think we we directly can be connected to all those who practice the Dhamma. Okay, and that gives us the strength. It is not about just when we say it's not about going to the vihara. We are not constructing any viharas, we are not going to the viharas, we don't have the bhikkhu sangha, we don't have a proper bhikkhu sangha. We are not learning the Dhamma properly, and we don't, they say, oh, why we are studying Pali. But let me tell you that in our department we have doctors, engineers, management students, and lawyers, and housewives, right from age 16 to 75. We have students, the maximum number of students learning Pali. And everybody can connect to the teaching of Buddha through their own life experience. The Dhamma can change the life of people. Okay, and with that you have the confidence, you have the right perspective towards life. You don't just blame people that okay, because of this I am today like this. But you have to look forward and see that okay, what is the future, what we can do, how we can be happy. And I think you need to do more research on the teaching of Buddha to bring out all the things which have been distorted through years. It has taken a lot of people have taken a lot of efforts to I would say distort Buddhism, which has reached us. Thanks to all these Western scholars who has given us the Buddhism, right? And but still we are depending on those researchers today. If we do the researches in ancient India or in Pali, and then we will get the original sources and the history of Buddhism in a true sense. And actually that is what do you say, very powerful, which we can we should accept it. That's what I feel. And it's people say, why you want to learn Pali, what is the what is the job opportunity, and what is but I think we shouldn't be learning Pali because you don't have a to get a job opportunity. It's for knowledge. And when we have the what do you say, the strength to face the life, it's a way of life. It's Buddha has given us right from how to live life to how to die also. Okay, so that aspect of giving us a new way of to look at life is very important. In when we keep on saying that okay, we have been deprived of doing this, but when Baba Sahib gave us the Buddhism, why we are not looking at it, right? And why we are sticking again all to the old thing while giving Buddhism. Baba Sahib was very clear what he was doing, and I think we should march ahead from that point. While giving also Dhamma, he said he has made, my student kept on saying that I should speak on 24 22 vows. But yeah, and if you read those vows very clearly, Baba Sahib was very clear about what he wanted us to do. He wanted us to first he gave those verbs, if you categorize them, if you see them, how he said do nots, मी ब्रह्मा विष्णू महेश यांना देव मानणार नाही आणि त्यांची उपासना करणार नाही. And then he gives then what I should not do first, right? And then he says what I should be doing, right? And how I'm changing, that is the way. And when I read those verbs, I felt that he was taking inspiration from the teaching of Buddha. Because if you read the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Buddha also says, Dve anta bapajitena na sevitabba. He says, okay, two extremities are not to be, followed. So Baba Sahib also say, okay, now we were following this Hinduism, right? Or we were worshipping with the fear of God or whatever. But now I don't want to do this. I'll be accepting Buddhism. I want to do this. He has replaced it with something, and he has given us the teaching. So I think our duty is now to go into the teaching and do a lot of work, because I don't see people working in that field. They say, oh, what is the use of going into archaeology, what is the but we don't know the mainstream today is how distorting they are because of our ignorance, and this is going to cost us in the future because we are not looking at it now. Everywhere you have archaeological excavation, Buddhist architecture comes up, right? And the reports are not seen, and then you don't have so after some time the report comes, oh, this is some other site. Okay, it has nothing to do with Buddhism. Then but nobody ask why it is not Buddhism, right? When we don't have that kind of scholars who can question. We have all these historical writings, and using the books which are written by the Indian scholars only. When I was at Oxford, Professor Gomre gave me the first book. He said, have you read this Hardships and Downfall of Buddhism for the first time? He said, I didn't. So you should read this first. That's what he said me, that you are not getting, earlier you were not getting the opportunity to upgrade yourself. But now it's an open thing and you should upgrade yourself. What is happening? Who is writing on the ancient India? Who is writing on with the help of archaeology, art? Who is writing on ancient India? What happened? How Buddhism was declined? It is not Indian scholars. And when I go and teach Buddha's teaching or Buddhism or Buddhist studies, people, the students are so ignorant. They cannot differentiate between the Buddha and the Mahavira. That kind of knowledge we are giving to the new generation. So why this is happening? This is
Ma'am,
happening
sorry
because
to interrupt.
yes,
Hello,
yes,
hello. Sorry
yes.
to interrupt. You have 2 more minutes to go.
Okay, so what I want to say is, when we are learning Pali, we are also trying to inculcate the cultural aspect of the Buddhism. That is very important. You have to study not only the language but what it represents, what it has, the ancient history, geography, and how why to go to pilgrimage. Okay, why to how to venerate the Buddha, what is a stupa, what is a leni, why Buddha's image is there, why he is he is smiling, or why, what kind of mudra is this. So you don't know anything about it, and then you say, okay, Buddha has not done anything. Buddhism is all about meditation, you shouldn't be sitting with your closed eyes. But that's not true. Dhamma is not about just vipassana, or there's a lot of other things which we have in the teachings of Buddha. And I think Buddha is the greatest teacher. And that's the reason we call Baba Sahib the Bodhisattva, because he has directed us towards the greatest teachers of the world. And it's now our duty to learn from him. I think that's my approach towards Baba Sahib's giving us the Dhamma, and what is our role and our duty now to educate ourselves and to reinstate the culture, Buddhist culture in India, especially in Maharashtra, where we have lot of Buddhism coming up. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, and I think it's a very excellent view, and I think we'll have a Q&A. But essentially, what you also talk is about rescuing Buddha from the ritualistic only or one perspective only. There are various ways to look at Buddha, and also, for example, visiting the monasteries or visiting the ancient sites there, or the architectural findings or the archaeological diggings. There still is a lot that we can excavate as an knowledge.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now I invite Chris Queen to please. Uh, Chris, it's all yours.
Thank you, Suraj. It's such an honor to be on this panel, and I thank you for introducing me as a white Ambedkarite. I gave a talk about being a white Ambedkarite at the Boston Study Group last December, and I realized that my connection to this deeply inspiring movement goes back to 1987 in my first visit to India, right after getting my PhD. And I had the great privilege of meeting Vasant Moon, who was publishing the complete writings and speeches of Baba Saheb Ambedkar. And I stayed in his apartment on several visits and met his wonderful wife and family. And then thanks to Professor Torat, I met some of the old timers who were the direct associates of Baba Saheb Ambedkar, such as Godboli, who suggested Nagpur as the place for the Diksha, Ratu, who of course was Ambedkar's secretary right up to the very last moments of his life, Nanak Ratu, Shankaranand Shastri, who was one of his associates, and then Maisab Ambedkar, who met with me a couple of times to talk about her deep dedication to not only her husband, but also to Buddhism, carrying this torch right into the 1980s and 90s as she became extremely elderly, but never lost the confidence to carry this on. Now, in 1991, the centenary of Ambedkar's birth, there was a wonderful seminar at Harvard, at Columbia University. In fact, Maisab Ambedkar was there, but also quite a delegation from India. And I realized at that time that having attended Union Theological Seminary, which is closely related to Columbia right across the street, in those years, I had not realized who Dr. Ambedkar was. But in fact, in 1952, when my father received his PhD from Columbia, and on his way to becoming a kind of a radical Methodist minister, Dr. Ambedkar is there getting his second doctorate, an honorary doctorate from his alma mater, Columbia. His first doctorate, of course, was earned in 1913 to 16. And I realized also at that time that my own grandfather, Dr. Benjamin Ernest Mitchell, whom I called Baba as a child, was at Columbia at the same time as Baba Saheb Ambedkar, getting his PhD in mathematics. So I have both a father and a grandfather who got PhDs at Columbia, and yet never realized as I grew up and went to college and discovered Buddhism, that this connection between Columbia and Ambedkar and this extraordinary liberation movement of Dalits in India, which parallels in some ways different and similar to the great civil rights movement in the United States, was there all along, and something to discover and to dive deeply into. And so I would have to say that since that first trip in 1986, I have really thought about nothing else but Dr. Ambedkar and his legacy, and was treated with such generosity by scholars and by practitioners. I mean, Professor Ayyathurai and Professor Bhagat are both people that I met at conferences previously in my trips to India and New York. And you, Suraj, is somebody I've gotten to know both through your writing and through your extraordinary speeches in the last couple of years. And I would give a call out to your book, Caste Matters, extraordinary book. Everybody should get a hold of it. I should also say that my dear friend Rajesh Kumar Baud from Bodh Gaya is signed on to this seminar. I noticed that his name popped up. He greeted everybody, and he has hosted me so many times in Bodh Gaya, meeting the Dalit-Buddhists who are there in the Mecca of Buddhism, where so many pilgrims come to celebrate their newfound identity as Buddhists in India. So there are many rich things that I could go into, but I would like to say that this invitation to speak on the 175th anniversary of Iyothee Thass gave me an opportunity to go back and reacquaint myself to this extraordinary figure in Indian history, and to realize that just as Ambedkar is little known or understood in the world at large, so Iyothee Thass, Pandit Iyothee Thass, has been suppressed. His memory and his achievements have been suppressed, even in India and even in South India. I mean, as the first convert, untouchable convert to Buddhism, I mean, this is an extraordinary precedent to which Ambedkar followed. And also in 1891, which was the year in which he founded the Davida Mahanjana Sabha and passed 10 important recommendations having to do with criminal law, calling it criminal to call Dalits pariahs, creating separate schools with scholarships for low-caste people, employment opportunities for educated Dalits, political representation at various levels. All of these things were things that Ambedkar picked up later on, not perhaps directly because of his influence, although it's very interesting that one of Ambedkar's lieutenants who served in Madras, that is Ratamalai Srinivasan, his sister married Iyothee Thass, and their son married Srinivasan's daughter. So there was kind of a family marriage connection between Ambedkar and Iyothee Thass. But as Teltumde mentions and stresses in his very important and valuable article in the collection which you edited, Suraj, that is, his article is titled, let's see here. See, I'm missing it, but it is Teltumde's article in the one that you co-edited with him. He says that even though there were these many parallels between the emphasis on education and political reform and Buddhist conversion between Ambedkar and Iyothee Thass, still Ambedkar's Buddhism, this Navayana Buddhism, really diverged in many ways from the kind of Buddhism that Pandit Das converted to in Sri Lanka under the Venerable Sumangala, who was one of the top Buddhist priests in Sri Lanka, introduced, of course, by Colonel Olcott, the American theosophist. That Ambedkar's Buddhism really is quite revolutionary because he was a modern man in the sense of a heretic. He was a heretic. Heresy comes from a Greek word which means to choose not only your toothpaste or your type of vehicle or something or your clothing, but your basic belief, your outlook on the world. We have the chance to choose how we see the world. And education is all about that. So Ambedkar was a heretic in which he saw the traditions of Buddhism, and his collection of Pali texts in translation and of Buddhist secondary literature was huge. And I've spent a lot of time up in the archive in Siddhartha College looking at his underlinings and his choices of teachings, the things he rejected, the things that he pulled into the Buddha and his Dhamma, that great last book of his, to create an outlook, a worldview, a practice which would be appropriate for people who are experiencing historical social oppression. This is a Buddhism that is unprecedented in many respects.
Sorry to intervene. You have 2 more minutes to go.
Thank you. And so what I have tried to suggest in my description of this Navayana Buddhism of Dr. Ambedkar is that he rejected some basic things about Buddhism. The 4 rejections in the beginning of his book are, a young prince of 29 years old who suddenly discovers life and death for the first time. This is not believable. There was something political going on in ancient India that sparked Siddhartha Gautama to go out to the forest and seek a deeper meaning of life. The 4 Noble Truths could be blamed, a basic of blaming victims for their own suffering because they have hatred, greed, and delusion, and that's the meaning of their suffering. This is not acceptable. Karma and rebirth, not acceptable. You blame people for their disabilities rather than seeing that as a result of the social system. And finally, the role of the monks in society as scholars or meditators and not social workers, not activists. This is wrong. We need a Buddhism that rectifies those. So I suggest in one of my writings in 1996 in this volume, Engage Buddhism, Buddhist Liberation Movements in Asia, Dr. Ambedkar and the hermeneutics of Buddhist liberation, that his 4 Noble Truths might be as follows. The truth number 1 is indeed suffering, but it's the social suffering caused by structural inequality. It is the suffering caused by oppression and by social systems that are designed to keep certain people down. Number 2, what is the cause of this suffering? It is obviously social structures which are impervious to change and which require profound reform, structural change. Number three, what is the goal of our practice of Buddhism? It is to achieve liberty, equality, eternity. He loved fraternity. He loved this phrase from the French Revolution, although he said it can be mapped directly onto Buddhist teachings: liberty, equality, fraternity. And finally, what is the eightfold path? We could reduce this to the threefold path. That is, educate, agitate, and organize. Wonderful slogan he picked up in London from the Fabian socialists in London. So he was using materials from his travels and his studies and reformulating them into a Buddhism which is essentially unprecedented. But it maps onto Buddhism that we see from teachers like the Dalai Lama or Thich Nhat Hanh or others who believe that suffering was something more than simply the need for an attitude change. Meditation and mindfulness is not going to solve your problem if in fact you are hungry, or if in fact you have no housing, you have no educational opportunities. So this is a kind of Buddhism that is deeply inspiring to people outside of the Dalit community, I have always argued. And we all have to work to try to spread the message of Baba Saheb Ambedkar and Pandit Iyothee Thass and all of these great thinkers who took a great ancient tradition really to a new level, because they looked clearly and deeply, as Thich Nhat Hanh likes to say, look clearly and deeply at the situation that you face in your life. If you are one of the oppressors, if you happen to be a privileged individual, you have as much responsibility as those who are suffering to rectify this situation. And so there is a role for each one of us to address these problems and to read and to think and to agitate really for a new world. And Buddhism and religion can play a part of this. The last thing I will say about Tautfumde is that I believe he got it right, unlike some other scholars, by saying Dr. Ambedkar was deeply spiritual, deeply religious. This wasn't just a gimmick for getting more votes, for example, or more support. He really believed that religion plays a critical role in every society. And I think we can see this. Religion is not going away. It's only becoming playing more of a role in world affairs. And there is good religion and there's bad religion. I think we can all agree to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I think that's a good segue to our Q&As now. I'm going to unmute you. I'm going to unmute Gaji, and I'm going to unmute Dr. Yojana. So, and also I think what it kind of implies is the deeply spiritual aspect of Ambedkar. People have been visiting Ambedkar's relation to Buddhism as early as when he graduated, or rather when he matriculated, when he was given the Buddha's biography, and so forth and so forth. And so is also Iyothee Thass's relation. Now, we have certain questions on place, and also I think if the panel could help us zero in on what religion would mean. Is it the missionary practice of Abrahamic religions? Is it the animism, or what? How do we even contemplate or come about the very idea of religion? So before I go to you, Gaji, there are a few questions. Gaji, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Are you able to see me or no?
Now we can see your beautiful face now.
Okay, good.
So Gaji, the question to you, I mean, what I'll try my best to summarize. One of the things is like the way Rajasekaran asking, and I'm collating, so I need you can just drop it, like collecting these bullets into one box. So Ambedkar, Rajasekaran says that when there was a connection between Hinduism and caste, and that's how we can see his veering to Buddhism. Did also Thass come to the same conclusion about Hinduism? Because why did he opted for Buddhism? Of course, the humiliation episode speaks a lot, but then of course the Tamilian kind of space is quite unique. And then we have a question from Durgesh from Johns Hopkins. He wants you to distinguish between a caste-less society and a post-caste society. And I think he says we often conflate these two ideas, and the later is often invoked in liberal discourse, which is a post-caste society, to justify the declining significance of caste. Now, in addition to that, please also try to answer or try to help us understand on the critical feminism that you are trying to. I'm sorry this is too much on your plate, but I just wanted to make sure you.
Well, definitely. Thank you. Thank you for the questions. There are, I think, many more. Everybody has joined in. Some of you have been writing to me privately. I'm not able to respond, because I didn't want to lose the communication from the speakers. But I note down, hopefully I'm able to get back to some of you later. But to begin with, regarding Suraj's question, which of course is sort of collated from others, religion, yes. Let me begin in a very my doctoral dissertation defense experience at Columbia, New York. So it was a 2.5 hours of very nice discussion. And of course, my panelists were, my advisor was Nicholas Turks. And we had Professor Valentin Daniel, Partho Chatterjee, Sudipto Kaviraj, all of them there, Bonnie Pate from Yale. They were there. After going through my work, Partho Chatterjee asked me, Gajendran, you really brought out something totally new for us, amazing, absolutely unknown aspects of what you call as Tamil Buddhism and so on, and about Thass and all that. But then he said, very gentle way, yes, religion as we know. This is not, you're not talking about certain established aspects of religion that we all know anthropologically and historically. So how do you call this as Tamil Buddhism? Why do you, and so on? So that's a very important question that has relevance to some of you too. 2-3 things that I want to point out. What, in a nutshell, there are multiple things connected with religion. Chris and Dr. Yojana Bhagat would know more, but in my perspective, at least 3 crucial elements have to be there. Number one, the concept of God, as I had written in one of the slides. Concept of God, and then you need to have rituals. How do you celebrate your God or goddess? You need to do this, maybe cut a goat or cut a camel or just crack a coconut or do light up a camphor, multiple ways, right? Mm-hmm. So those are the rituals. And then the third one is also a question of salvation. That means, okay, I'm eating well, living well now. Oh my goodness, how do I handle my aspect of death? Am I going to die? And what would happen to my life after death? Nobody has an answer. So that's one of the fear of death drives us towards I should be better off, probably better after my death. That's the sort of idea of salvation that we are after. So these are the crucial 3 elements in my view, or elements of religion. Now here comes Thass. As I said in my talk, I go around different viharas that were established in Tamil Nadu by the descendants of Thass, especially in northern Tamil Nadu and in other parts of South India. By the way, there were Tamil Buddhists in Secunderabad, in Hubli, in Kolar Goldfield. So it was a South Indian presence. And interestingly, there was no iconography of Buddha with all the different types of statues and nothing like that. Very simple. That provoked me to ask, was Thass after iconography? What was his attitude towards Buddha's iconography? Clearly, he was not for the nice shape of Buddha and so on. Clearly, he took to the serious philosophical and political principles of Buddha very seriously, as somebody who stood against caste and for a democratic linguistic diversity of India. That way he was a pioneer. And then and he looked at Thass, like Chris was saying about in the context of Ambedkar and Ambedkar's own unique perspective of Buddhism. Thass comes up with this, like Buddha was one of the first sort of rationalists in the world. That's how Thass writes. So Pagattarivu, all that. So for example, he was even reworking Tamil script. So May is body. So Unmai is truth. So there is a particular way of rewriting Unmai. And he reworks that word to say Unmai. May means body. So whatever that you see in this world in front of you you should take care of it, should engage with it. If it is right, help, take it. If it is wrong, correct it. So all this for him were Buddhist values. Here and now, grapple with it. So no ritualization, no esoteric understanding, nothing. So that's the kind of perspective he has. So Chris said he went to convert. Yeah, he went to Sri Lanka to get converted in 1998. He comes back, doesn't talk about conversion at all. This is unlike Ambedkar. Why? That's how his organic idea of Buddhism comes into being. Clearly, it comes to the opinion that whoever was called an untouchable clearly was a Buddhist. And no doubt about it. Only because that person was a Buddhist, he was prone to, or she was prone to the humiliation called untouchability. He writes that. So he wrote a piece in English, who are untouchables. So in a way, it echoes what Ambedkar did, right? So what happened? How did it, all that? I just don't have a clue. But Thass wrote in English. So that way, Tamil Buddhism doesn't have, it is a very unique way of anti-caste community formation. In a way, I think Lenny pointed out, how when you shed caste, how do you form, how do you create a community? So Buddha and other Buddhists in Tamil tradition, he looks at ancient Tamil writers such as Avai, one of the women writers and poetess. Avai was also a Buddhist for him. So he records the ancient time, medieval Buddhists, modern Buddhists, and so on. And he was also celebrating European Buddhists in a big way. Has a serious problem with Max Muller, the German, and who propped up Brahmanism and Hinduism in a big way. He attacks and he ridicules Max Muller by saying he is spreading loose mouth stories. So no Indian academic had the guts to do that at that time. Here you go, Thass, sitting in Chennai, taking on Max Muller, clearly demolishing him. And now we have Dorothy Figueroa's book clearly showing that Max Muller was cooking up many things. He was interviewing happily Brahmin males in London and promoted, and definitely he had racial elements, meaning propping up Aryanism, which had its consequence. 70 million people lost across the world, Second World War. Max Muller had a role in the propagation of that concept. Anyway, so that way, the Buddhism, to put it in a nutshell, Tamil Buddhism is not something in an exclusionary or ethnocentric perspective. That's a very wrong way of understanding. Okay, some of our own Dalit intellectuals do, which is horribly, horribly wrong. So there are Telugu Buddhists. In Hubli I was there. Hubli in Kannada, they had their own Buddhist tradition. So whoever felt something powerful in this world that can create, that can solve our problems, they took to Buddhism. And they looked at it from their own language. So nobody should say, hey man, you're not speaking Hindi, so what are you talking about? So that's wrong. So that way, there is a clear, inseparable connection between linguistic diversity and Buddhism spreading across the subcontinent. That's the difference from Brahminical Sanskritization, right? So across north and south, you have a uniform subcontinental Sanskritic view. But Tamil Buddhism talks about how do you understand Buddhism through its own language? How Marathis could understand that way, so that the lowest denominator can question caste and create a horizontal community. That's one element. And then, Suraj, quickly, the second and do I comment? Sorry, I took a long time. Just a couple of more minutes. What was the second question you said? Sorry.
So it was about the castelessness to postcaste.
Yeah, from the John Hopkins friend. Yeah. So I have written this phrase, the postcaste society, and then caste-free. Lenny also, Lenny's title, dissertation title itself is casteless community formation, that kind of thing. So this is a thing, this is a question that we all have to grapple with. If the caste is imposition from outside, Brahminical texts defined, Brahminical practices codified, spatially we are segregated. And if we are talking about, like Chris said, our equal opportunities with others, how do we create a society? It has got to be an anti-caste society. Okay, it has got to be a caste-free society. That doesn't mean only the Dalits will be at the center and everybody else would be remaining as Brahmins or Kshatriyas or Vaishyas or whatever the caste is. No, all of us should come together, the oppressor and the oppressed. That's what, Iyothee thoroughly celebrates a Brahmin who gave up his Brahminhood and married a Muslim. He writes about that. right? So that way he was, and then he was ridiculing the Brahmins who were happily letting white men to cohabit with their women, whether married or not, and having babies and all that. He writes about that. Brahmins are okay with that, right? And these are the questions we have not written or spoken about in anthropology. Interracial marriage of Indians, intercaste marriages, we have a long way to go. Whereas the intercaste marriage, honor killing was happening at the time. Thass was attacking that. You allow a white man to have fun with you, that is okay, but you don't bother about. But when people really fall in love, he talks about love marriages. That's where I connect with critical caste feminism. So Swapleshwari Ambal talks about sexuality. She talked about, I had a goosebump while reading that. So she talks about child marriage, child widowhood. Then she said, like, you are forcing a 15-year-old, a 9-year-old, 10-year-old girl to be a widow because he was married to a 30-year-old man. How do you expect her to keep quiet? She will not even sleep with the man, have a baby, probably kill that baby, have relationship with another man. That was Swapneswari Ambal way back in 1907. And she says, the men, the moment they become widower, within few months they get married. And they also have extra women. But you don't do the same to the young girls. So why would they keep quiet? So this was a discourse. I write about this in the article, Critical Caste Feminism. So it was a radical, that's why I call it as critical caste feminism, inseparably connecting caste and gender. We have a long way to go. So in that sense, when I say post-caste society, more than what is castelessness, caste-free, that all of us shedding free, and whoever is bearing caste, says, for example, Mathura, this happened 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I was crossing Mathura in a bus and somebody comes in and says, hey, I am a Brahmin, give money. He begs. And he says himself as, calls himself a Brahmin. My relatives were there, I got provoked. Of course, kept quiet. But the point is this. So it is on my part, it is, instead of getting angry, I need to civilize that man. You are begging, you are desperate for my money, otherwise you may starve to death. And what organ you have extra? Do you have an extra lobe of brain or any other extra sexual organ? We can let's be asked very clearly. So you are human, I am human. Where does this Brahminhood come? We need to ask. That's the reason Thass attacks all the concepts, philosophical concepts. That's a problem in our own Indian philosophy. What is Atma? He repudiates. What is Brahma? He grapples with. I write about that in the book. Brahma, what is it? You are cooking up something metaphysically. Tell me in real sense, what does it mean? What is Atma? He grapples with Atma. Can you produce something materially that can transform my life and yours? Otherwise, you are fabricating something as if you uniquely saw and that I couldn't see. You see, that way, the Indian philosophy, you take any Indian philosophy, people are grappling with Brahmin male perspective of philosophy. That we are neatly couching that into Indian cultural philosophy, Hindu philosophy. Well, are we sure? Are we sure? So this is a massive problem that we have to grapple with. There's a long way to go. So I stop here. We'll continue the discussion.
We can come back maybe. So Dr. Bhagat, so there are a few questions maybe you can pick up on. So one of the questions that Dr. Lakshmi Berwa asks is, how about, taking Ambedkar's Buddhism to the Indian masses who are not only Dalits, but non-Dalits too? And usually that kind of, that continues to happen because to quickly respond to you, Gaji, I want to segue that. I was in Nepal and in one of the temples there, and there a child or a adult came and had a thing that I'm a Brahmin, and he was begging. And I think this Brahmins sporting their thread and asking for big dakshina has been an historical, even in the Mahanubhav tradition, the Chakradhar Swami himself, he had scolded, and we have seen that in various written works. Dr. Yojana Bhagat, how do you foresee Pali or the Buddhist values that come from Baba Sahib Ambedkar reaching non-Dalits? Is there a program? Is there a way that we can go? And one of the ways that was done was obviously through the Vipassana that Goenka and his tradition managed to do. But clearly, many people who went to Vipassana kind of removed Ambedkar from their identity, and many Buddhists that I saw in especially in this, continue to have this different understanding. So I'm just so that's one. And maybe in addition to that, can you also maybe talk about how the woman question, the woman in the Brahminical system? This is Abhishek G who is asking. If he says the Brahman male dominance, is tied to the liberation of women. So wouldn't that be the biggest blow to Brahman, and that the liberation of women, which is the primary cause of Brahmins for opposing Hindu code bill? So simply put, it is the position of women in the Brahminical system, I think, irrespective of caste, is that of a property. So if we have to live, if if we can help women liberation, wouldn't that be like a big cause also towards Buddhism? So there are two questions for you, and also maybe you could mix that with identifying how do we describe religion. Gaji was talking about God, ritualism, and other facts that we need to hold on. What do you think?
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some connection problem. I can't hear you properly. Okay. Hello.
Yeah,
Can
we
you
can hear.
hear me?
Yeah,
Go
we
ahead.
are able to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. How can Buddhism reach, the non-Dalits? That's, actually, when any person, I am little skeptical about this, because, when we try to learn the Dhamma originally from the Pali sources, it is more rational, appealing, and whoever learns it, who is very rational and is above, you can think properly, very scientifically, that person adopts the teaching of the Buddha, and he is able to, practice the Dhamma. And it doesn't matter whether he's a Brahmin or he's a Kshatriya. It is about the mind and the person. It changes the mind. Buddha talks about the mind and its development, and where you can you are very scientific. If you are a scientific person, a rational person, and a very, what do you say, a logical person, the teaching of Buddha would appeal to you. Okay, so that is what, when we talk about, when we come across the teaching of Buddha in this way, um, to my surprise, though we have accepted, but I have many students, who are non-Buddhist, but they are learning Buddhism, and appealing, the Buddha's teaching appeal to the people who are with this state of mind. Okay, so that is another aspect, because anywhere in the world, where people are like this, because Buddha was a great scientist and a very great rationalist, a good teacher, and he would explain things very clearly with respect to day-to-day life. Any problem you're facing today in the society, or today, even in any problem you're facing in the household, the answers are there in the Pali literature. That is the greatest aspect of the Buddhism. Buddha did not leave, oh, I will answer the monks. It's not like that. He explained how to dress, how to sit, how to walk. All these Vinaya is given. So whenever you are, talking about
Voice is breaking.
how to face any problem in life. Okay, that has been explained by the Buddha very clearly. So I think, Buddhism or
Uh, I think unfortunately we might have just lost her. So uh, let's wait. Or so
I
Chris.
think I think she is there. Uh,
Oh, she's there. Okay, Dr. Bhagat, if you are if you could hear what I'm saying, then what I will do is let's give Chris the cue, and once Chris wraps up, you can come and perhaps give a closing. Chris, so the chapter of Teltumade that you were talking about in the Radical in Ambedkar book
Yes.
is called the Strategy of Conversion to Buddhism, its intent and aftermath. That kind of goes about. Chris, one is of course help us with how where you left us, the kind of religion, and 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 how does one because this is one of the burning questions. Many Dalits that I know of who believe in Ambedkar sometimes have a very two kind of views. One is we are atheist or we are agnostic. We don't want to believe in God because God has all this problems. So, and Buddha is the easiest answer because Buddha is, and also there are many conflicted understanding of Buddha. For example, as Dr. Bhagat was saying in her previous speech, that 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 Ambedkar has given us Buddha, so let's not go any more further. Let us just adopt that and work. And how do you respond to that, especially given your ethnographic exercise, and also you look at you have also have established something in Bodh Gaya, the order, and so help us through your own experiences. And if we can't hear you, Chris, you can also close your video so we can have your clear audio.
You tell me if both my video and my audio are not working, but otherwise I'll leave it the way it is. And I want to address that question because I've interviewed a lot of people, a lot of Dalit Buddhists about whether they meditate or not. And I think Professor Bhagat would be very interested in this because the jury is completely out. There are those who believe that meditation is terribly important and valuable and useful. For example, Professor Bhalokande teaches Pali at University of Nagpur. He is a regular attender of at Igapuri at the Goenka sessions. He's an experienced Vipassana meditator. He believes that it strengthens not only his teaching, his scholarship, but also his activism within the university and within society. Whereas his colleague believes that meditation as a Buddhist will put you to sleep and make you kind of a patsy for those who want to manipulate you because you're not paying enough attention. Well, of course, meditation is all about attention. So I think, Buddha means the person who's awakened to what's going on around him. So this question needs to be continually discussed as part of the issue. What does it mean to be a Buddhist? What does it mean to be a person who is struggling within society? And I think Ambedkar Buddhists, whether they are, Indians or white or anywhere, need to decide what role mindfulness, which has been commodified now and made into a kind of an app on your phone, is really significant as a spiritual practice. Does it have ethical depth to it? In other words, mindfulness is being taught to military officers so that they can kill people remotely through drone attacks without feeling guilty when they go home for dinner at night. So they're simply turning into kind of samurais by practicing ancient meditation. Well, that's obviously not what the Buddha had in mind, because ethics is important. So I think the reason Ambedkar did not meditate is because not only I think he had a medical issue because he was suffering tremendously from his medical conditions toward the end of his life, and sitting still was really hard, and he was so devoted to finishing his written work. Right up to the very end, he was working on Buddha and his Dhamma, and that sitting quietly and meditating was something that he just couldn't give himself permission to do. I think that's an issue, but I think also because he felt that the agitation issue, which is an interesting word to introduce into Buddhism, agitate for change in society, social change, means that you have to do it with a kind of calculating aspect, not running around setting fires or blowing things up, but confronting people. Right speech in Buddhism means being outspoken. the Buddha admitted this. Within the Sangha, if there's someone who's misbehaving, you need to confront them within the community, try to rehabilitate them, or ask them to leave for a period of time. He was a good dean in that respect. But right speech involves being forceful and calling out the injustices that are there. This should be part of Buddhism, not being a pacifist in the sense that you are not going to create a radical environment where you go because you are willing to call out what is going on. And I like the title actually of your collection, The Radical in Ambedkar. And I was going to get back to that reference, by the way. I wonder, Suraj, if you would give me a chance just to mention 2 or 3 titles, because as a professor, I feel like many of the people online here right now, I noticed we have 85, we were up to 103 a few minutes ago, would like to follow up on some of these questions with excellent books that are out there and available. I just noticed, for example, that Sangharakshita's Buddhism, Ambedkar and Buddhism, that just appeared in 1991, is available for $14 on Amazon. This is a really good summary of how Dr. Ambedkar's own spiritual connection to the Buddha grew from that book that Kaluskar gave him on his graduation right until the Diksha in 1956. The issue of women in Buddhism. Urmila Pawar and Meenakshi Moon have a collection called We Made History Too. And the subtitle is Women in the Ambedkarite Movement, extraordinary collection. The person we have, I think, most to thank for rehabilitating Pandit Iyothee Thass is Aloysius, G. Aloysius. His Religion as Emancipatory Identity is an incredible book. And his article, Transcendence in Modern Tamil Buddhism, a note on the liberative in popular religious perceptions, is part of a larger collection which itself shows a great deal about Ambedkar Buddhism called Reconstructing the World, B.R. Ambedkar and Buddhism in India, edited by John Dale and Belts. I just mentioned 2 or 3 more, if you don't mind. The Buddha and His Dhamma is now out in a critical edition, edited by Rathore and Verma. It helps you through this very profound text by showing you what kinds of things Ambedkar was reading at the time and what he meant to certain things. So I recommend that. I have published an article called Ambedkar Buddhism in the Oxford Bibliographies in Buddhism, which is online. You have to pay a fee, I think, to read all the articles in total. But if you're interested in following up annotated bibliography on Ambedkar Buddhism, it's on the Oxford Bibliographies. I think that's a bit. Ranjan Mani in De-Brahmanizing History has a very good section on Iyothee Thass, and Gail Omvet, Buddhism in India, Challenging Brahmanism and Caste, also a very good section on Iyothee Thass. So I just throw those out for those who want to continue with their reading. And just to get back briefly to this question of what does it mean to be a Buddhist in the modern world? It's not only a challenge for people who are struggling with systemic oppression and suffering, whether it's in India or other parts of the world. I mean, with this pandemic we're now suffering, you realize that people of color are disproportionately dying in emergency rooms because their health is already compromised by a lack of medical care. And now comes this pandemic, which is creating an insurmountable obstacle to survival and death. And so that's a form of suffering. What role does religion play? And Gaji, I think, was very good to say, what is religion? It helps us say, what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be dead? And I think religion at its deepest roots deals with those kinds of questions of relationship, of the meaning of survival and death, the quality of life, the degree of engagement that we have with our surroundings, with other people. Can you look somebody in the eye and say what you mean, what you believe? Or do you have to always use euphemisms? Do you always have to look away? Do you have to hide when certain people appear? These are actually religious questions. So I think Dr. Ambedkar and Iyothee Thass were both incredibly courageous in how they confronted their situation and did not shirk the obligation to speak up, and even to be rejected, arrested, beaten, death threats. I mean, death threats are something that all leaders, to some extent, have to confront.
But if you're Barack Obama, or if you're B.R. Ambedkar, or you're Iyothee Thass, you're probably every day wondering, is this my last day? That's a religious question.
Excellent. This is very beautifully put. We'll come to the second round, which will be our last round. So, but I see Dr. Bhagat is joined in online. So, Dr. Bhagat, please jump in where you left us. Or if you would like me to also give you a starting point, let me know. I can shower or sprinkle.
Yeah. Please give me where I don't know where I left off. Yeah.
So,
Tell me.
you were talking about how there are non-Dalit students also taking an interest.
Yeah, actually, when you start learning Pali, and you go into the original teachings of the Buddha, because that is the source for writing Buddhist psychology, Buddhist history, Buddhist geography, all the ancient Indian culture is there in the Pali literature. Not only we take it as an original source to learn all about ancient India, but we have the culture, we have the art, we have the architecture, everything is there in the Pali literature. And anybody who wants, people are writing Indian history, and what is the source for that? They don't mention the Pali literature, but it is the Pali literature they are taking help of, right? So when we go to the original source, and anybody, as I was saying, that anybody with a logical, rational, and a very scientific mind, because Buddha talks about the mind first, right? He says it's a sixth sense, and that has to be treated, that has to be trained, vandanang chapalang chittang durakhang dunivaryang ujung karoti medhavi, that. So you have to understand that your mind is very fickle and it has to be trained. So when we have a trained mind, the body goes with the mind, right? So you have to have a very powerful mind, and you have to train the mind. The mind training is very important, and that is what Buddha talks every time. And he says that whatever is arising, okay, whatever is happening, it is the mind which is making us do that. So you have to strengthen your mind, and whoever the person who is logical, understands that okay, what you have to do is, the first thing you have to train yourself. It is the morality. So you have to practice morality, concentrate, or make your mind sharp, and then self enlighten. You have to develop your panya, that is your mind, and that makes you a perfect person. So this teaching, it doesn't limit yourself that you have to be Dalit to learn all this. So people who are actually learning, and they are taking advantage of the teaching of Buddha when it's coming to the forefront. Okay, and we who have been given Buddhism on a platter, doing it, not learning things from the Buddha, and that is, I think, a very sad thing. Where you get, Baba Sahib has given us such good opportunity to become powerful, and we are not taking that. And I think that is, I feel very sad when people are not following the teachings of the Buddha and actually learning and taking inspiration from them. So that is why I make people say that you have to learn Pali, so that nobody can cheat you, because it's the original source.
Thank you. I think we'll come back. This is the second and final round. So, Gaji, we'll go with you. So, I think especially, some of the teachings we do at Harvard is one of the courses, or rather off-class discussion, is to begin the conversation with death, because death is eternal. And I think, and I think, what Chris suggested was also, I think death needs to be embraced. And I think but then also that sounds nihilistic in a very materialistic world, but I think that's what Buddha or whoever we come from. So my question to you again, it's packing three bullets in the same. One is, see, Iyothee Thass's influence somehow, and we can start pointing fingers at whoever has somehow not pierced into the rest of the whatever India means. geographical unity or cultural synchronity, however we make that. And because many Buddhist scholars that I've spoken to had a very scant understanding of Iyothee Thass. And when you're talking about his English writings, now that should not be an excuse at all for anyone to even overlook. And I think I am personally today I am myself ashamed that I did not know Iyothee Thass had written in English. So, and especially his treatise on feminism, and then there's too much that I wrote, especially on affirmative action, and then land to children. So what you are doing essentially is you are trying to, the accusation might come to you, Gaji, that you're trying to proselytize Buddha, or you're trying to protestanize the Iyothee Thass by radicalizing us. Our understanding of Buddha is the way Pandit understands. So with that trail of thought, many people, you also in your very first slide, you were talking about how they denigrated identity. But also you said how Dalit is framed. Many people in this audience do not have the understanding of its inception of the very emergence of a community. So many Buddhists that I know, not many, but many influential middle class Buddhists, they are ashamed of whatever Dalit is. Similarly, could that be like Iyothee Thass was perhaps ashamed of this identity, because people might kind of take cues from that and to claim. So that's second. And third is what Lenny is arguing, Dickens, is about the interesting of Judith Butler's kind of invocation of self-narrative being. But how do you frame this in an excommunication? If it's a self-narrating in an excommunicate space, you are basically talking in a cave where the echoes of bats are coming to you more than your own voice. So I think this is a provocation to you, and I know there is a lot on this. Please try to cover as much as you can. Thanks. Wait. I have to unmute you. I think, Gaji, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm good. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So thank you. In a way, you succinctly brought people's questions together. And certainly, I was also I noticed Lenny's question on that is very important. Now, I'll go one after the other. I think probably taking Buddha seriously and going through the medieval texts, as somebody was commenting, in Tamil, somebody had written here, the diverse medieval, ancient medieval texts that Thass was pouring into, how over centuries Tamils have taken to Buddhism. And he reads them as caste-free people and anti-caste people, clearly. So he keeps writing in a Sadi Yatra, that means caste-free, casteless. He keeps writing that, and then if at all there is a possibility of a caste-free society coming in at all, after the ravages of Brahminism and Brahminical male power, Brahmin male power, all that, he thinks it could be only Buddhism. And you cannot replace a subcontinental Brahminism, a Brahminical society, as we know, through a subcontinental Buddhist society. No. So it is a regionalized thing, regionalized, and people, like I said before, that's one. So the question of this life, like Buddha grappled with, we know enough Jataka stories and others. Some German scholars particularly have worked on this. How the descendants of Buddha centuries ago were attacking, confronting the Brahmins directly, not in a esoteric way, philosophical way, Brahminism. No. Clearly, okay, you're talking about Maya. What is Maya? What is Atma? And you're talking about previous life, this life, and afterlife. Could you explain? How have you seen it? So these are the stories that we know that the Buddhists grappled with centuries ago. And Buddha started it in some ways. That's how it has been interpreted. Iyothee Thass clearly comes in that tradition. He is not bothered about previous birth. He is not bothered about the later life. And he is, life after and so on. But the present life, why somebody is poor? Why children are left in the train toilets to die? Why widows, young widows kill, their own kids, which the mothers are actually not interested in killing. That's, a widow is pregnant. How would she do? How could she continue to live if she is not able? It's a question of choosing between her offspring and her life. So the mother decides to kill the offspring to live. So he raising an important question, like, should we take care of that woman as well as the child or not? Should we leave them in the, so let them do what is that? So for him, Tamil Buddhism is ethical rationalism and to communicate with others. It's not like, here I tie up with Alini's question. When I narrate myself as a cost-free person, costless person, I'm not sitting in the cave and yelling and then, sort of hallucinating myself. No way. I know fully well if I have to continue my, life further, if I want to see my next generation, I have to find a partner who would be having the same frequency, who I cannot put down. I have to ask her consent if I want to have a baby. Do we have the idea of consent? Respecting the body of the other woman? I don't think so. These are the women 100 years ago raised. Our films and everything is imposing male sexuality, violent sex. That's how we have been brought up, right? So, but these are the people who are asking these questions, how to respect man, woman's body equally. But Thass was a Siddha medicine practitioner. Like Madam Yojana, Sister Yojana Bhagat would say, Pali medicine tradition she talks about. Thass imbibed that, and he writes in the Tamizhan, what happens to the fetus of a woman in 3 months, in 5 months? How? That kind of close understanding. That's because of the compassion for other women, not because she is a Dalit woman or an untouchable woman or a Brahmin. No. He was talking, so that kind of equanimity and egalitarian and unequivocal standpoint against caste comes through, comes from Thass. In that sense, he was self-narrative being, and in his book, in his weekly, it is not a lone voice haranguing all the time from the rooftop. No, there are multiple voices. That's why I'm using the phrase polyphonic voices are emerging from the Tamil. There were women, there were men. I have even taken down how many men and women have raised questions. There was a correspondence column. So people were raising questions and Thass battles with them without editorializing the question. I mean, that kind of thing. So there was a community to create, a casteless community being created via Buddhist ethical rational principles was emerging. And this is not exclusion, and this is a sad part. We only discovered Thass in the 90s. It is not a conscious, our historians are stuck up in the archives, state archives.
You mean 1990s?
Yeah, 1990s. That is when he was discovered. And the credit goes in a big way to Aloysius for somehow struggling and collecting in a big way without losing weekly, even for a week. Now, the point is, so after that, from this, I think we have a pointer. Now, I was roaming around in different villages. One day I was there in the same pant and shirt for 3 or 4 days. I was hopping from one village to the other. People were writing, Iyothee's descendants were writing and publishing small magazines in different villages of Tamil Nadu. So people have been writing, speaking, practicing, and forming a community which is not an exclusionary, a Buddhist monk doing it. No, there is a collective community formation. The primary condition for that is you have to be against against caste. That is a primary contradiction for Indian society for Thass. Our Marxists have to combine that. Primary contradiction, yes, class inequality, yes, but is deeply embedded in another primary contradiction called caste inequality. If we are going to think about only a Brahmin as a class, why do we have temples? Temples are controlled. Why Iyothee is coming up? There are US 1,000 temples are going to be there already. Why do they do that? What gets legitimized? Whose ideas get legitimized? So Iyothee attacks those temple formations, and so to create a community where everybody can come to. So that's the thing. That's what I mean by the casteless community. It is a post-caste society. It means actually this in practice, So I kind of combined it. And the identity question is this. So we need to really grapple with what do we mean by Dalitness? Is there any positive way? What is our positive culture? Positive memory, positive history. We have not, but we simply say glorious past. What is it? Can you refer to a text to tell me that how my past is a glorious past? Please don't tell me that my great-grandfather was a king. My great-grandmother was a queen. No, I simply want to be an ordinary casteless being. That's how I look at my past. Can you give a text? Can you talk about an artifact? That's what Thass gives. He talks about simple thing, castor oil making. Castor oil making, clear away your darkness. Therefore, a celebration. But the Brahmin males appropriated this as a Hindu festival. He writes that. Diwali is not Diwali, Deepavali, castor oil's creation and celebration. So he was into, this is what I call artifacts, and from their artifacts, understanding the history and the practices, knowledge, traditions of the marginalized, which I don't think our caste-based anthropology and history can help. Let's be clear. So that's what I mean. When you create an identity, this is what, and our agenda is not over yet. We celebrate Dalit identity, but what is it? It is highly romantic, in my opinion, to be very frank. We are not able to produce a positive memory and culture yet. We are somehow, our hand is broken. My sister was attacked. This is happening. Who are the people who are dying on the streets today? Most of the people, the migrants. Let's ask the caste question. We need to take stock of that. Who are the people who are dying in the US today, as Chris was saying? African Americans, who are still getting racialized. But the big difference between the US and India is that you can't count the white men and women who are speaking against racism. But in India, we don't have a strong attack on Brahminism. How many books do we know about against Brahminism? Brahminness, Brahminization. How many books do we have questioning the temple culture, temple lands, which run into thousands of acres? I go to Germany, a place called Eisenach, where Bach studied, the great musician, where Martin Luther studied. And he was in a fort called, Wartburg. He wrote in the early 1600, the first time from Latin to German, the Protestantism, clearly. And he was hiding and doing it. And the school where he studied was a monastery then. Now it is a high school. Why should we convert our temples into high schools and colleges for the marginalized? Can it ever happen? Who are the beneficiaries? Iyothee Thass gave us the frontal attack, and Periyar followed, Ambedkar followed, and many more will follow. You can never stop. You can never stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think, Dr. Bhagat, we will come to you perhaps after Chris, or do you would like to go now? It's either.
It's okay. Yeah.
Okay, so Chris I'm going to unmute you. Before I unmute you, there is one question towards you, and then you can gather your thoughts as a closing.
Okay.
This is again Lenny Dickens again asking to you that the conversion is something very central to how we understand, and also the conversion as a phenomenon, and not just conversion of mind or whatever, but conversion as a body, how you represent and all. Conversion comes with a lot of complications, and but in an Indian context, it has become very vulgarized. It has become very cheap, and conversion has just meant something negative. And I think that is one of the things. So Lenny asks, he wants to know the idea of death and Buddhism. I think that's one that kind of goes in. But Gaji, before Chris, you speak, we are doing a talk on caste among Brahmins, where we have in 2 weeks, where fellow Brahmin scholars 4 will come and talk about how caste operates among Brahmins, to kind of go and transcend beyond caste and Dalits only to look at it. Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
Okay. So as far as death goes, in Buddhism, Lord Buddha and traditional Indian metaphysics, which includes Hinduism and Jainism and Buddhism, really involves many lifetimes, and rebirth and karma are central. They're baked into Indian philosophy in so many respects. That is to say, this isn't your only life, that how you live your life will influence what your next life would be. It might not even be a human life. It could be an animal life, or you could be born in a hell realm or be a deva or something like that. Dr. Ambedkar really rejected all of that. He believed that religion has to be based on science. It has to be based on reform and social change and social commitment. And that we have one life that we know about. We don't know what happens after death. He was agnostic with respect to that. And his Buddhism was, I think, deeply influenced, and this is a great connection between him and Iyothee Thass, by Lakshmi Narasu's Essence of Buddhism. Narasu was a Tamil Buddhist who had a tremendous influence. His first publication of that book was in 1907, and the introduction was written by Anagarika Dharmapala, who was, of course, the Sinhalese reformer and protege of Colonel Alcott. And the second edition of that in 1948 was with an introduction by Babasaheb Ambedkar, who said this is a really good presentation of rational Buddhism for the modern world. So Essence of Buddhism by Lakshmi Narasu deals with questions of death, what is the universe like, what is it made up of, and so on. So trying to create a Buddhist modernism which addresses the intellectual as well as spiritual needs of people is there. As far as conversion goes, obviously it's a much deeper concept than simply attending a ceremony. I mean, the Diksha was really a world-changing ceremony, not only in India, it seems to me, in Nagpur, but really when you look at how many people showed up and what it deeply, profoundly meant about their identity, being a part of that thing, I think all of the people who have written now about having attended that or even attended echoes of that in other parts of India felt they were deeply moved by that. It's like being born again as a Christian in fundamental Christianity, that you go to something and it changes your life because you do make a commitment and you begin to try to live in a different way. You give up alcohol, for example, or you begin treating others with respect. All those things. Conversion is an ongoing process. It's a work in progress. But there may be a ceremony, a ritual that actually brings it to a head for you because you've been preparing for it for a long time through study or through therapy. Maybe you're meditating or going to the herbalist. Suddenly this event changes you. Some people break into tears. Some people jump up and down and say, "Hooray! I'm a new person. I'm being reborn." So I think those are important. You can't reject ritual. You can also say it's all about ritual. It's both. I wanted to mention, since Gaji mentioned Martin Luther, that's a wonderful reference, that it is an interesting kind of factoid, trivial fact, that Iyothee Thass consulted and worked with the Reverend John Ratnam, who was a Methodist missionary, a Wesleyan missionary, and Babasaheb Ambedkar had lunch almost regularly with the Reverend J.W. Pickett, who was the Methodist Bishop of Bombay, when he was considering which religion to embrace as his new liberated religion after the Yale speech. He says, "I will not be dying a Hindu, I will die something else. What will it be?" So he's considering Christianity, met with this Methodist bishop. I mentioned this because my father's a Methodist minister who was a liberal and also worked very hard for civil rights. And my grandfather, who I mentioned, Baba Mitchell, who went to Columbia at the time of Babasaheb Ambedkar, he was an integrationist in the racist state of Mississippi. He was from Jackson, Mississippi, and he was one of the first integrationists down there. So Methodism and Wesleyanism and Lutheranism were a form of Christianity that were dedicated not only to bringing religion to the masses through use of, translating the scriptures into common languages that people could actually read, but also reaching out to the poor and believing that service to others is part of being a spiritual person, not simply being a monk or a recluse or something, but actually addressing the pains and sufferings. So I think this Protestantism had some influence on both of these great Buddhist figures, Indian figures, but they created a tradition which was uniquely Indian and uniquely faithful to the Dhamma as they understood it.
Thank you so much, Chris, for this new thinking points, Dr. Bhagat. And also, what I hear from three of you as I also try to grapple this topic is, one question could arise is, can there be a non-Buddhist Dalit? Is it a possibility? Second, is there a way that inter-religious conversations of Dalits can happen? because clearly not all Dalits are Buddhists, and they are spread out into various religions. So because of religious kind of barriers, I see, unlike in African American context, there is interfaith dialogue where people of different faith, black Muslims, black Christians, and black Buddhists, and so forth come. Can there be a possibility of interfaith Dalit dialogue or something dialogue that can come basically on the issue of spiritualism too? Don't get me wrong, interfaith is about spiritualism and holding the spiritual religious stand. Somehow I see the, the divisions kind of play out in a very different way. So that is the second question, and I think it's an open question for all. And Maithili I already put you out, and you already put. She had asked about vernacular, and you talked about how Pali text is an important source for us to approach Buddha and the understanding. So two questions basically, and the third question is: can one be a Buddhist without going to Vipassana? And what are the possibilities? Can Ambedkarite Buddhists be Vipassana sadhaks, or how is their future looking like? So three questions. One is, can there be a non-Buddhist Dalit and how it is looking like? Second is interfaith dialogue of Buddhists, and the third is Vipassana. Can someone not practice Vipassana, or how do you look at Vipassana, especially through the liberation of Dalits who are, as Chris was saying, hungry, and Ambedkar did not do meditation. I don't know what you think about that. So it's all in your court now.
Okay. Yeah, what you say, yes, there are the non-Dalits who are Buddhist, and I think that is happening today. In fact, not all Dalits are, going towards Buddhism.
Yeah.
But I think, the solution given to us by Baba Sahib is very clear. And, we have we have been shown the path and we are not walking it. We are not trading on it. So that's our loss. That's what I feel, because I'm sure he has given a lot of thought, as they say. He has researched through various religions, and then he has chosen Buddhism. So he has reason to do that. And when we actually practice Buddhism, we get all the answers that why he had given us that. So when and as far as when you study the ancient Indian culture or history, you realize that when we were the mainstream, when the Buddhists were the mainstream in India, it was the traders and the merchant class who was following the Buddhism. We were the merchants and the powerful people. Why people keep on saying that, okay, we the Dalits were following the Buddhism. It was not like that. It was, when you say that the most powerful, rich and very logical people, mostly, when we talk about Buddhist ancient India, we see that the traders and the merchants, and when you have read the inscriptions, you have all the when you talk about ancient India, we have Ashoka following the tradition Buddhism, and propagating Buddhism to different parts of the world. And it was the merchants and the traders with whom the Dhamma traveled to all different parts of the world. And then when we talk about the when we see the big art and architecture being constructed, a lot of cultural development seen. And the numismatic evidences shows that the kings and the rulers, all those, they were Buddhist and practicing Buddhist. And they were I don't think they were all what you say as the Dalits. So this has happened afterwards, when we lost Buddhism after the 12th century. Okay, so when we talk about the teaching of Buddha, it has been distorted. We have lost it. But when we try to revive the teaching of Buddha and look it at the different perspective, we have to know the history, what has happened. And when we look at the art and architecture, you have to understand what the Buddha has said and what the people at that time were talking about when we say about Buddhism, right? So it has we have lost it. But it was there in Sri Lanka, it was there in Burma, and in the different parts of the world. And it has been prospering. And when you look at the history, whether it is in Japan or China or Korea or wherever, the pilgrims and people from all over the world used to come to India to learn things, right? You have to, the Chinese pilgrims, the Yuan Sang, and people coming to India and studying. So that we were rich because we had Buddhism with us, right? So it's not just Dalit and Buddhism. You don't connect it that way, I think, because it is logical and open for all. And that is what brings us, when I think that is what the idea was of Baba Sahib, was to give us Buddhism and bring us out of that frame which we call as the Dalits, and bring into the mainstream. Buddhism is the mainstream, was the mainstream, and if we are into Buddhism, we actually join the mainstream. That's what I feel. And that we have to make ourselves really powerful with the teaching of Buddha, because it has all the answers which because Baba Sahib says that I have taken the values of justice, democracy from the teachings of the Buddha. And when he says that clearly, why we go back again and say that, okay, what we should be doing, is there Dalit and Buddhism? I don't agree to all these things. And it's like going back again, two steps back again, and again trying to search for an answer when it is already there. Okay, that's what I feel.
So no, excellent, thank you. No, the point is, so there are some Buddhists who could become Buddhists, like yourself, like my parents, and some of because they were given Buddhism, and had my parents not born in Maharashtra, for example, and born elsewhere, they would have been Hindus, or they would have been Muslims. Like 2 generations ago, they were Dalits, and then they became Christians. So the point is, like, as a torch bearers of Ambedkar's so-called legitimized legacy, because we are carrying Buddhism, how do you see yourself, for example, having a connection with other faiths, especially the Dalits of their faith? And if you don't like Dalit word, we can use any other word if you like. But can we use them as a Buddhist Christians or Buddhist Muslims? It wouldn't sound. It would sound more paradoxical. So that's why has to be certain lexicon. So we are just using that sense. So how would you connect basically with other people?
Yeah, see, when we say Buddhism, right? When we say Buddhism, there was the word Buddhism was not there, right? Those who the person who practice Shila, the one who practice the Shila, the one who keeps his morality, is strong in mind, who has all the good qualities, and have walks on the path of Dhamma, is true to himself. That person is what we call as the Buddhist, right? It's not just because my father is a Buddhist, so I become Buddhist. It's not like that. You don't become a Buddhist by birth. That's what I feel. Okay, but you have to practice. It is not just by birth. You don't become. That's the reason people say, okay, we don't have monks, and the Buddhism was lost because the monasteries were lost, because Brahmanism continued, because you become a Brahmin by birth. You don't become a Buddhist by birth. You have to cultivate yourself. You have to learn yourself to a Buddhist, to a good human being, and to follow the teachings of Buddha accordingly, and that gives you the strength. So it is like, if you study, you research, and you understand what Buddha wanted to say. It's not just, okay, I have adopted Buddhism, and then I don't follow the precepts and I become a Buddhist. No, you don't become a Buddhist that way, right? So when you say, okay, like people have done that, with Vipassana also people have done that. I'm a Vipashi because my parents are Vipashi. You don't become a Vipashi just because you are born to a Vipashi parents, right? You have to practice it. So that is what I feel when people are trying to define Buddhism in this way. I think you have to go into our own history and culture. Basically, we have to develop a culture which has been distorted, which has been somehow we have kept aside from that. And then when we develop that, when we read about it, when we learn about it, then you know that what we had earlier, and what is our legacy, and what we should be carrying forward. Okay. So I think identifying with that thing is more important. When Baba Sahib said, okay, you now follow Buddha and what we had earlier. Okay, now, okay, whatever happened, let go, and then we have to move forward with what we have in the future, because that is what will bring us to in parallel with the whole world. I think that's what I feel.
This is excellent. I think this can continue for long. I think Chris has a hand because, and I'm getting so many because I think I just touched some pulse for apparently. Chris, okay, I'll have you take the word. Just before I go, I think there is clearly a little bit of disagreement, or not disagreement, but there is also, like Gaji was talking about. If you talk about glorious past, what does that even mean? And but also he's talking in the same way that what you are talking, Dr. Bhagat, is a Buddhist culture, and I think that's beyond religion and how we establish our identity. And I think the cultural artifacts are something that remain with us. But also Ambedkar's Buddhism is very much anti-caste. And how much of anti-caste discourse does it appear in the Buddhism that we have, especially among the practicing Buddhists in India, who literally, in my experience, they look down upon poor Dalits, call them and don't want to immediately affiliate with the because it has in a way become a middle class identity. So I know many friends who are Buddhist, and they are Buddhist because they don't want to anything to do with their grandfather's identity. They are like, no, we are done. We are not Dalit anymore. We are not anymore. We are new. And this is a class identity because it's an urban located, and in a way it is also certain morality. We can look at it in different way, and I think that is how it has come about. So Chris, to you, and if Gaji and other one to just offer a very quick subset, because how much does anti-caste element fix in there? Because anti-caste struggle is secular. It need not be tied to one canon. Go ahead, Chris.
Very, very briefly, you know that I think Gaji mentioned the iconography of Buddhism. What was that for Iyothee Thass? Not really sure, but Gary Tartikoff has gone all over India photographing Ambedkar statues that are on the street corners all over the place. That says something about a neighborhood. It says something about the people who place flowers in front of that statue every day and take care of it. It means something when you say Jai Bhim. If there are other people around who don't appreciate Jai Bhim, then you have to say it with a certain amount of courage. Ambedkar himself, he named his house that he built in Dadar, Rajgriha. He named his college, Siddharth College, Milind College. He was signaling already in the 30s and 40s his connection to Buddhism. These symbolic external things are just as important as the formulation of deep mental habits of thought that Yojana is talking about. Both of them are very important. You may be undergoing a deep transformation, a conversion, as it were, in your mind because you're practicing meditation or you're reading scriptures or you're whatever, but also you are showing externally that you are identifying with Dr. Ambedkar or with Lord Buddha, and that means by its very definition that you are anti-caste, that you are anti-privilege, that you are anti-injustice, and these things. So there's messaging, there's going on, as well as deep personal inner transformation.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I think this conversation is something that merits a kind of a whole day kind of back and forth, because their questions are so intimate and they are so tied to our own identity, the way we look at it, but also it has to do with our ancestral past and our forthcoming future generations and their future. And then we are at a time where we are yet to grapple the nuances as more and more information keep coming, like Ayodhya, anywhere else, the Asokan, the great Buddhist history kind of comes forward. Ambedkar argued that we were originally Buddhist, and then again that goes, and there is also a little bit pushback on that front. So we have much questions, and many people have written so many important questions, but they did not relate to this conversation, so I did not pick those questions. So don't feel sad that I did not take the people who have written their commentaries. Your questions are going to be saved, and after this conversation ends, I'm going to share this with the panelists, and they are accessible online. Even if you Google them, you will find their email addresses and all the information on that. I just want to plug, as I already said, on 7th June or 14th June, either of that dates, we will do the problem of caste among Brahmins. That will discuss about casteism and caste question in Brahmins, where 4 Brahmin scholars will come and talk. On that note, thank you so much, Gaji, for tuning in from Göttingen. Thank you so much, Chris Quinn, for tuning in from some village, and thank you, Yojana Bhagat, for tuning in. And please keep write to us if you have any questions, suggestions. We all love you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Suraj.
Bye.
I'm going to unmute all the participants so they can thank you also.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody's unmuted. You can express your thanks.
Thank you, Suraj. Thank you,
Jai
everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gaji.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye bye.
Jai Bhim.
Bye-bye. Jai Bhim.
Jai Bhim. Jai Bhim.
Jai Bhim.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mama, mommy, thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Stay
Yeah.
well.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Bye-bye, Suraj. Bye-bye.
Bye
Bye.
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 Nice to see you. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Bata. Marzali. Bye-bye.
Hey, vanakkam.
Hi, Gaji. Bye-bye, Gaji.
Gajen, we'll talk.
Bye.
Okay.
Be
Thank you.
safe.
Thank you very much.